Hello and welcome to the Swim Brief. Somebody that, Steve, the best way to describe you, besides the head coach of Grand Canyon University, is you're one of those people who every time I talk to, I go, man, I should talk to Steve more. So I'm really thrilled to have you back. You were the first guest on the second coming. I guess actually we are on the third coming of the Swim Brief. I've been calling it Swim Brief 2.0. I ignore that attempt I made back in the 2010, and here you are back again. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, one of the things I've been doing is catching up with people. You know, I think we've all, in some ways, we've been having a very common experience as human beings here over the last 9 months, but it's been a little bit different everywhere based on, on where you are. Take us back in time a little bit, because I actually saw you right before everything shut down. We were both on the pool deck at the college swim coaches invitational there, and then I think you left after the first day of the meet. Everything got shut down back home. So to take us back there and talk about how it's been.
Yeah, well, who knew? It's funny, for a couple months, I've been telling my kids to pay attention to the news about this virus coming out of China, because I said, this is going to get bad. This looks kind of like what the AIDS reporting looked like back in the 80s when I was at UCLA, and you just saw that get worse and worse and worse. And coverage looked really similar. I said, I just told them it was going to get bad. And I think they all thought I was just a crazy old man. And we were there at the NIT for CSCA, and sure enough, our administration, calls me up and says, you got to come home. We're bringing everybody home. And that was just the beginning, and then, we had a diver that had qualified for NC2As. That was gone. And we just kind of limped into, we're done fairly early. We're done by the end of April. So we were able to continue practicing through April, and had a couple kids stay for the summer, and we were shut down for a short bit while we kind of regrouped in the pool that we rent, powwowed with them to be able to get in and get going. But by mid-June, probably, we were back and running again. But everyone scattered that could scatter. People got left at home. We, between what the NCAA and what GCU came out with, we were able to tell our athletes, look, especially the seniors, if this is, we had several on our women's team who just weren't comfortable with the whole situation. And we were able to just tell them, look, we're going to honor your scholarships. You can stay back at home, finish online, and you don't have to worry about coming here. We told everybody else, you have an option. You can opt out. Nobody loses a scholarship, nobody loses a place, or you can come. And pretty much everybody else came. But then there was, then you get into the nitty gritty of how are you going to keep everybody healthy, and trying to convince everybody that not only do you have to take their own personal, health and welfare, they've got to consider the health and welfare of their teammates, some of whom have compromised health histories. And then there's the old guy that's the head coach that doesn't want to take the disease home to his wife and his 89 now, just deceased 90-year-old mother-in-law, and that we were trying to just get through her dementia until she passed away, and trying to get everybody to understand that the health and welfare of the program's at stake. And if we don't come through this in some way and show that we can manage this problem and provide value to the university, then we might not survive like so many other programs haven't survived because of COVID. So that whole thing has been an ongoing process since we were back in school, and it's been really hard, and it's not fair to the athletes, but it's been really hard.
Yeah. I mean, if I rewind a little bit to a comment you made about, offering opt-outs and all sorts of different options for athletes on the team, I can imagine, just looking at your roster, you have a number of athletes that, their home is not in the United States. I can imagine that added a considerable wrinkle to the decision-making process and even the ability of people to come back.
Oh yeah, well, we still have two athletes from Brazil. One who was a new freshman, so she needs a visa appointment, and that keeps getting pushed back, so she won't make it here at all this year. She's a
Yeah.
very talented breaststroker, and she's very frustrated by it. But she has another year of eligibility, and we just said, we're not getting rid of you, so you just, you're doing great online in classes, so just keep it up. And then we've got another guy who, because he's up, this is his third year coming in. He's trying to figure out a way to get here, and we've kind of advised him not to do what I think he's going to do, which is try and travel through Mexico and quarantine 14 days in Mexico and then try and get here.
Right.
Everybody else had adventures. We had, kids arriving mid-semester from Russia because of delayed visa appointments and everything like that. And certainly the Trump administration didn't make things easy with new rules on international athletes either. So that took some juggling and getting used to. But
right.
We got most of them here. And
wow.
So everybody's, we've probably passed the hardest parts of the season right now. We got 2 meets in the last couple of weeks. Went down to U of A, we're able to do something, had a meet at home, we're able to run something. So things seem to gel a little bit now. We've got one more coming in at mid-semester from Kenya via Germany, which is another juggling, and we still don't know if she'll get here in time, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, just for people listening who've never coached college swimming, the visa process for an international athlete is challenging under normal circumstances. It takes time and patience and work. And right now that system has been, to describe it as stretched, to a breaking point is probably an understatement. And there's all sorts of layers of complications there. You said you were able to do some practicing, but of course you had to take in all these considerations, the health of people on the team, the athletes, yourself, your family back at home. What kind of stuff did you implement, and maybe how has it evolved even then since then? Because I think, like if I look at my own life, like there's stuff or precautions that I was taking in April that I think like, oh, okay, that was a little bit silly, like segregating packages that came to my house in a room and not opening them for 24 hours, that kind of stuff. So how is that? What are you guys doing, and how has it evolved over time?
Well, I think my athletes would tell you the evolution has become more draconian, and they're probably right. We started out just saying, with a basic plan for the pool. We practice our pool's off campus. It's a facility rent, so I had to come up with a plan that our administration would buy, that our medical team would buy, that the high school's people would buy, and ours turned out to be stricter than what they were doing for their swim team. And basic things like, okay, nobody's using the locker rooms. We're all coming out and ready to go. Nobody gets to go inside and change. You can't use the showers. You each have a spot 7 feet apart around the pool where you're going to put your stuff, and you start there. You'll do your stretching there. You'll have a mask on until you get in the water. Until you go to get in the water, you take your mask off. 3 people per lane. We learn to group our lanes by roommate groupings as much as possible within the 2 different sides of the pool, where we have mid distance and distance, and then our sprint, what we call our hybrid group. And then because we're off campus, we have to ride in vans. We've got 5 vans, and so just the masking of the vans. Every vent window's open. All the windows are open to provide circulation. And we learned we needed to have a seating chart to know where people were hit. We did have someone who was particularly reckless, not wearing their mask enough, that did test positive several weeks ago. And because he was a social butterfly, and because no one else would say no to him coming into their rooms or wherever they were, riding in a car with him without his mask on, we had about a total of 15 athletes that ended up in quarantine.
Wow.
For 2 weeks, and nobody liked quarantine at all.
No.
And so we came up with more rules that just said, okay, there's no cross-pollination in the dorm rooms without masks. You got to have your mask on if you're visiting people. And that doesn't seem like a big ask, but it's a big ask for these kids. And I get it. And GCU's dorms are most, we have all of our kids in basically an athletics bubble, and we were able to keep mostly a swimming bubble and housing. So they're all in apartments, and all the apartments are one bedroom, are individual bedrooms with a common suite and cooking area. But we've, said, if you're in the common area, we've advised them wear masks. You just don't know. And we had, then during that quarantine, as that started, we paused the program because we were waiting on everybody else's test to come back around.
Right.
And we test every 10 days. And so we paused the program, and apparently the athletes decided that, well, program's paused and we're sort of in a bubble in housing, so we can treat the university like a resort now and go down to the hot tub and be unmasked in an 8-foot wide hot tub. And unfortunately, the group that did that was there with the guy that ended up being positive, and so they all were part of the group that had to go quarantine. So I had to be a little bit harsher about the rules and thought we were good, and then got to a point where things weren't still being followed. So I just said, we found out that a couple kids went off campus to their friend's apartment to have a dinner party, unmasked indoors. And so, I've told them you can't bring back more risk into what the imperfect bubble have is. And so you can't be off campus and inside and eating because you're unmasked, and it's just not going to happen. And all along I've been telling kids, if you can't do this, it's okay. You just opt out. Just don't be here. And nobody wants to do that. They all want to be able to do it all. And I get it. So the end of that was I drew the line in the sand about 2 weeks ago, a little more than 2 weeks ago, at a Zoom meeting. Said absolutely not. No going off campus. You can't go to restaurants off campus. You can't do things that we've talked about most of the year, but just said, you're still doing it. It's not happening. And if it does, I'm taking scholarships and I'm kicking people off the team. And I'm just going to be that brutal about it. Because there's too many other people at risk, and there's the health of the program at risk. And I tried to get them to understand, and they understand it. They just don't like it. And I, it's not fair. I tell them it's not fair. But understand this is COVID. This isn't me. And it's the CDC and the NCAA and our administration, and then just me making decisions to try, because I'm responsible. And, that keeps me up at night. And so, sure enough, less than 2 weeks after I drew a line in the sand, group of 10 of our athletes went 30 minutes off campus to a house to have a get together. And 3 of those athletes are no longer with our team now. So,
wow.
And I thought that would be the beginning of the unraveling of our season. And what turned out to be is that was days before the dual meet we had this last weekend. And it was probably the best meet we've ever had.
Wow.
It's the most competitive meet. 6 pool records were set, 3 by the other team, 3 by us. We all suited up, both sides, and just went for it to give our kids a chance to swim fast. And we only suited up 8 women on the swimming side for the meet. We had 5 events where we only had 1 woman entered in an event. So throwing away points, and our women eked out a tie, which we considered a win, and our men won, by 10 points. And it was exciting dual meet, and that group just gelled together. And where it wasn't because of me, it was all because of them, and they just somewhere found resiliency as a group and decided they were going to do something. And it was really impressive. And that's a great catapult for the second half of our season. We'll have the kids for about 7 more days. They'll break for winter break. We're letting them go home for winter break. They've got to come back and do a 72-hour quarantine and be tested. And all we can do is warn them that, hey, if you come back positive, you're going to lose 2 weeks of what 6 to 7 weeks is left till conference. So you're going to have to be careful, and it's a crapshoot. So we'll see how it goes. But I think we're in a good place finally to try and get through the rest of the season. But go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, you're doing all this in the context of one of the things I was thinking about before I was going to talk to you. You guys are in Arizona. by a lot of measures, it's never been worse, the COVID situation in Arizona. So I'm sure that's just listening to you, that's something you're monitoring in the background. You're trying to hold this season together as you can sort of feel the pressure there on the other side mounting more and more and more. I mean, I think as we record this, New Jersey, we're in a pause. We had a long period that was relatively quiet COVID wise in this part of the country, and it's just sort of exploded on us. I would love for us to still be swimming, but we also have considerations that you don't have. We have the indoor factor involved in our training. One of the things I give you credit for, and you're probably going to laugh about it, but I really think that you're the conscience of the Swim Coaches Idea Exchange group on Facebook. I'm amazed because I don't have the patience or maybe even like, I feel like my mental health would take a nosedive if I spent as much time as you do sort of knocking sense into people in that group. One of the things I saw you do is there's a bunch of sort of people raging about masks at swim meets and all that stuff. And you just said, look, and I'm going to paraphrase you here. Look, guys, we want to be able to have meets. These are the rules we're getting to have a meet. It's not a big deal. If we just do it, we can have swim meets, tell me, like, what motivates you to get on there and make, like, what in my opinion for Facebook are very sort of logical, reasonable arguments with people who sometimes are sort of flying off the handle?
Yeah, I don't know. I think different things trigger me to have different responses. I'm at heart a grumpy old man sometimes. I'm trying to grow out of it.
I don't think you're going to grow out of it, Steve. I think you're only getting older. So
I'm trying to be less grumpy. But there's just things when they don't make sense. The swimming community can be really entitled sometimes and think that the whole world should understand that they're special. And the reality is, gee, we're just not. And really, we're not as important as to the rest of the world as we think we are. And if we want to get along and want to be able to convince people that we can have our livelihood and our athletes can do what they want to do, we kind of have to be a little more sensible about our approach. And if people want you to wear a mask, then, gosh darn it, wear a mask. It's just, it's not that hard. I don't like it.
No.
In 100-degree heat, it's not pleasant in the early season here. But when our rules, there's places on my deck where I don't have to wear a mask. If we're not over athletes, if we're off to the side and just watching, we can take it off. But it's just being upset that your athlete has to put a mask on as they get out of the water just makes no sense to me. And it's good if you're not willing to follow that. I don't know many places are going to let you continue having meets.
Yeah.
And I get the arguments that, well, masks don't work, masks work. I don't care what the science is at this point. Just let me run my meet, and if this is what it takes, that's what I'll do.
Right.
And I just think people need to have a more common sense approach about this is survival right now. And we could. There's lots of people who are. I've been blessed. I worked for an organization that did not furlough anybody, and they funded us all, and we got to work at home and all of that. So I'm not suffering anywhere near the way a lot of people are in our profession, and I feel for them. But yet I see some of those same people fighting, their own existence because they feel like they need to be right about the science of all this, and where it's no, you just have to work with administrators and government officials and get them to agree that you can plan a safe environment, show them that you're willing to do it, and then follow your own rules.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, you're not only the conscience for there, but sometimes you provide a good fact check on something that I blog. I went off on private colleges earlier this year, and you're quick to point out to me that a lot of the stuff I was saying about private colleges wasn't true about the place that you work. GCU. What are some unique things about GCU you think that, because I also get the sense that in comparison to a lot of places, GCU is kind of, you could almost describe it as thriving in this moment. Why was it so well prepared for what we're dealing with right now?
Well, we're absolutely thriving. It's just amazing. Our president and the leadership team here are just, they're really smart businessmen, and they've been in education on the business on the for-profit side before they came here. GCU had been for-profit. That's now split off, and so they have a service company that's for-profit, and the university, which is not for-profit. But they're really smart guys, and they have kept, GCU hasn't raised tuition in the 13 years I've been here. It's still
That's incredible.
It's still 16.5. Their mission is to provide a quality education at an affordable price, and we're in a very inner city location, and we serve the community. So from the business side, these guys know how to respond to do things. What they learned was that when they sent everybody home and said work from home, and didn't get rid of anybody, the recruiting side of the university, the admissions folks, all those folks will never come back to an office. They are far more productive at home. So
wow.
We are maxing our enrollment. We just started building. We're maxed out on our housing. We're building 3 new apartments this year and another parking structure, and because people, it's a new campus. People like it. And what we keep doing is just, despite a lot of criticism about the whole for-profit side of things and what for-profit education can be like, we're running a hybrid of that, where there's a legitimate ground campus that has gotten awards for being, new and modern. And I just think that we run lean. We don't aspire to be things we're not. We're a teaching university. We offer degrees that will get people jobs, and we don't offer a lot of the more esoteric humanities degrees, which there's nothing wrong with those. It's just not our goal. And we want to provide something that's going to be of value so people can go out and get jobs. And that seems to be registering with, and plus they advertise the hell out of this place. So, everywhere I go into the country, the people know about GPU because they've seen ads, but their marketing team seems to do a really good job. And that is not our recruiting as a result has not been hindered by that. We can't leave campus. We can't have athletes in, and yet we have the best recruiting class coming in that we'll have, and we're already working on others, and we're turning kids away because we don't have enough room because we have an off-campus facility and only limited time. So we have better walk-ons now than we ever hoped to have. And so it's been their approach. And the other half of that was they know how to take care of their employees. They're living out a Christian faith, and they wanted to make sure their people were taken care of. And, we're not the highest paying university. They're smart businessmen. So I'm by no highest paid coach in Division I, but I get paid enough. Yeah. And I didn't get laid off, and nobody got laid off in the athletic department, and no sport got cut. And, we're finding ways for the sports that didn't get to go in the fall, that they're going to go in the spring. And our administration is very supportive of athletics. So it's been just a really, really great place to work.
And I can imagine, just as I'm listening to this, and I think back earlier to you talking about how you've had to get more draconian on the swim team. I think any college swimming coach listening to this would think to themselves, I would love to be as hard as Steve describes, but I don't know if my administrator would back me up or this, that. What kind of conversations do you had, and how did you know that, like, hey, I can be this strict about how people are going to behave on my swim team?
Well, I for one, I'm not sure I did know, but I'm a problem solver, and I communicate. My sport administrator is new this year, and he's never had swimming involved, and hasn't been there. So we work collaboratively, and I can make sure I over communicate with him. And at one point, I just said, we've been discussing this, and he knew there was pushback from some athletes, and I just said, Tim, I said, and our athletic director is a fantastic person named Jamie Boggs. And I said, Jamie, if you and Jamie can come up with a better way to guarantee that we get to the, because I can't even guarantee it, but a better way for me to do this. If you have answers that I don't have, and if you don't like what I have, if you tell me I can't do this, I won't do it.
Right.
But in good conscience, I can't not have these rules. I can't, in good conscience, accept more risk to make some athletes be able to have a social life that they want versus, an athlete who has compromised health is doing everything that they can to stay safe. And if that athlete were to get sick, I'd have to answer to a parent who might ask, well, why did you allow those people to do that? And in good conscience, I don't have an answer. So we talk about this, and a couple of my athletes did an end run to the athletic director and our sport administrator, and tried to lay out their side of how not having a social life was detrimental to their mental health. And that's always a good way to go if you're a student athlete and you're trying to defend something.
Right.
And I get it. But they were great. They were completely supportive. The first thing they said was, well, first thing you do is you need to talk to your coach, because you haven't talked to him yet, and see if you can come to some, see what he says and see if you can come to negotiate some sort of change in the rules. And I then met with, they sent me a summary of their meeting, and I said, well, send me an agenda of what you want to have and what you want to discuss. In the meantime, I'll talk with Tim and Jamie, and I talked with them, and it was clear that, they thought that they raised some good points, but ultimately it's my program, and I'm going to be making the decision what it was. And they had my back, and I really appreciated that. And, they said, try, just don't dismiss their ideas, talk to them and all of that. And we tried that. And I just, I was prepared to fall on my sword if I had to, based on principle. And I didn't have to go there. And I was really glad I didn't have to go there. But I talked with my wife about it. I said, well, if this goes the wrong direction, I might not be able to continue. So, but fortunately, I only had to have that talk with my wife.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like you face? I mean, if you're in the leadership position of any kind of program, do you feel like you face a lot of situations like that where you've just sort of got to make a decision and you don't know 100% whether you're going to be fully supportive? You don't know whether maybe you're going to have to ask for, the saying people say, ask for forgiveness instead of asking for permission to do something. Is that something that you find yourself having to do a lot, and has it changed for you over your career? Because I'm looking back, especially at the beginning of my career, I think I was always asking for permission to do this, that, or the other thing. And then I would get so frustrated. Oh, I didn't get permission to do the thing that I really believed in, that I wanted to do. And has that been consistent for you? How has that changed over time?
Well, I've most of my coaching career was in club coaching, and most of that I was always the head coach, and I ran my own program, so I really didn't have to answer to anybody. So right. when I came to GCU, that took actually a little getting used to, because I learned pretty quickly. I got batted down a couple times early on just for acting independently. When I learned very quickly, you need to include the athletic director in a discussion. We were a small school, so you actually get to talk to the athletic director. And then when I had a sport administrator, when we were getting bigger and the department was getting bigger, then you needed to collaborate with the sport administrator. And I like my job and I like being employed. So it wasn't a hard lesson to learn real quick that, okay, I'm going to over communicate with these people. And so I don't mind asking for permission, but, and I'll be proactive and just come in and say, this is what I'm going to do. And if here's the upsides, here's the downsides, here's where the pushback's going to come from. I try and anticipate all that stuff for them so they can see the big picture. And then, I'm very comfortable saying, if you tell me I can't do this, I won't do it. But otherwise, I'm going to do it. And that's been a good strategy, and it's served me well. And I try and be very respectful of the administrators we have here, because I think they're really good, and I value that they're smart. They're really smart people, and that wasn't always the case here. I mean, the athletic director who hired me was great, but some of the other administrators here, long in the D2 days, that was less professional. And now we have nothing but top rate people, and I rely on them to help me get through all this. They've made it clear we're all in it together, and we're all trying to make it work. So.
I want to switch directions to ask you another question about recruiting, and something I've always been curious about, because you make a reference to, Grand Canyon, it's a Christian university. You talked about them sort of living their own values and the way they treat employees. Again, having actually seen your team on deck, I know that you have kids of many different religious faiths on the team. Is that something, though, that you run into in recruiting, where you may be reaching out to a kid and they have a perception of what it's going to be like to attend a Christian university versus the reality of what it's actually like to attend GCU?
Yeah, occasionally we'll run into that, where people are hesitant because we're a Christian university, and I'm sure we've lost some recruits along the way because they just didn't like the vibe, that came with just knowing that it was a Christian university. But like you mentioned, we have Buddhists, we have Jews, Muslims, Christians, and agnostics and atheists. It's not a requirement to be a Christian to come to our school, and certainly not to be on our team. And it becomes a melting pot. And I think, though, I think if a real Christian worldview is accepting of everybody, and we just try and live that out. And I think if anything, the Christian school aspect is more positive than negative, because there's a lot of people, both athletes and parents, that want want to come to a university that has a specific set of values, and they like the Christian environment, and they like some of the rules that come along with being at a Christian school, and those rules are broken all the time. Let's be real, but it's a comforting environment, I think, and the mission of the university to serve in the community and we have lots of options for athletes to do that. All of those things are attractive, and actually, I think it becomes more of a plus in a lot of ways than a negative. So,
yeah, I mean, I think it's always nice to if you're out on the recruiting trail, like, have some stuff that defines the place that you work. When I was coaching at Georgia Tech, I remember, initially thinking, like, just like you described, we didn't have a lot of humanities courses. I was somebody that went to liberal arts colleges growing up, and I thought, oh man, this really sort of excludes us from recruiting a whole bunch of people. But over time, what I learned was, like, oh no, but people who are interested in engineering, like, I can automatically get into, the top of their list because of what we offer here. And all I need to do is find people who that's really what they're looking for. And I dramatically improve my chances of getting somebody. And there's plenty of those people who are very fast at swimming and good students and good people who I would want on my team. So rather than it being, sort of like a disadvantage, actually having some stuff that I could easily communicate to people that was defining about the place that I was working was really, really helpful on the recruiting trail. I don't know if you found the same.
Yeah, we just sell what we are, and we're a small Christian university where.
Don't you have like 40,000 students? How do you say small?
Well, we're not quite at 40 yet. We're probably pushing over 20 right now.
Okay.
And where the goal is to have 30 on ground, and that goal keeps going up. So they may change that yet, but then we have another 80,000 online. So
wow.
We're a big university on a small footprint, but it has a nice small feel, and the classes are kept small, and they're even smaller now because they got to do for distancing and everything. But it's we don't try to pretend who we're not to be, and that for me, that's one of the beauties of recruiting is that official we we haven't missed a beat without having official visits or being able to go out on the trail. And I think, I'd be happy never to do it again.
Yeah.
There's plenty of video that you can sell your campus. Kids can still come to the campus and do a tour, but just can't be with the coaches and all that. But, and we've recruited, lots of international students who never get a visit. They don't come here.
Of course.
So it's not been a problem. And we don't, anybody can put on a show for 48 hours. And we've always just tried to be who we are, whether they're here, whether we're there, and just say, this is what we are. We're not going to advertise anything we're not. And here's the weird training program that we do, and it's different. And you'll take some time. If you're used to something else, it'll take some getting used to, but we're just real upfront about it all. And same thing about, the academics and everything we offer here.
Yeah. So I now you've given me two more questions. I was going to do one more question, but now two more questions. I mean, really listening to you describe recruiting, I mean, is part of you, are you thinking that when stuff gets back to normal, for example, you are able to bring people back on campus, this NCAA dead period ends, are you still thinking, we're going to recruit differently than we did pre-pandemic? We're going to allocate our time and resources in different ways because we've been able to be successful with a lot of things with that piece taken away. Is that a consideration you make?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's something that, ultimately we'll have to discuss within the athletic department. I think there'll be pressure to get back to having on-campus visits. And as long as it's safe, I'm okay with that. But I think we've learned that we can save a lot of money, by not doing that. And that people will still come visit your school if you won't pay for them to do it. And so, you get into the competitive advantage thing. Well, if so-and-so is doing it, these other schools are doing it, should we do it? Me being me, I'm more than willing to try what other people aren't doing. And this seems to be working well. And granted, I don't do the bulk of the phone calls and the recruiting. Chris Linger does that, and he is much better at that than I am. And so he will have a huge say as our recruiting coordinator on what we do and who we bring in when we have that opportunity. And Chris is really smart about those things. So I'm going to listen to him.
Okay.
and so, I won't make any decisions without Chris about that, but I don't mind spending a lot less money on not bringing kids in on visits. I don't mind, we were going to do our first really big road trip to go visit a group of kids. We had targeted the state of Wisconsin. There's a number of athletes that we really liked up in there. So one of our athletes is from there, and their parents own a resort up there that we were going to base out of for a couple days.
Nice.
Or a week, and then just drive around Wisconsin, which, there's nothing wrong with Wisconsin in the summertime. Nope. So we were going to do that, and we may still do things like that to get to know club coaches and meet kids and parents. I would rather do that than actually put on official visits here, because it's a burden on our athletes here to host them and do all that. I'm just not a huge fan of official visits. So I don't know what we'll do.
Yeah, just as listening to it, I mean, I if you sort of invert the costs of travel, you can send one coach out and they can interact with conceivably hundreds of athletes versus paying for one athlete to come to your campus. So I think there probably is a lot of value there. I want to ask you sort of a more personal question. Being your friend on social media, I know that early on in some time periods where pools were shut down in Arizona, your own local pool, you took up swimming in it. Yeah. And are you still swimming yourself? And how has that been?
It's been great. As the pandemic started ramping up, you will remember how I looked quite, several months back in Cleveland in February, March. I was probably at that point about 80 pounds heavier than I was now, and I just looked at how the pandemic was targeting things. And I'm a big picture planner type guy, And so I took a look at that and said, you know what? This thing has I got a target written all over me
Oh man.
with underlying health conditions and the weight and the diet. And if I figured if I could lose a bunch of weight and change my lifestyle and be more fit, I might help my immune system should I ever, be have to get the virus. And I wanted to give myself every advantage, so I just made some big changes. Swimming was one of them, and at the time we had just moved up into a 55 and older community where my in-laws had lived. My wife's father had just died, and her mom had dementia, and so we didn't want to put her obviously in a home for the elderly because they're a memory care type place because of how rampant COVID could be in those situations. So we
Right.
just moved up to take care of her and make her whatever time she had left. She had congestive heart failure going on. So we know it wasn't going to be terribly long. And we were able to celebrate her 90th birthday. And so, and that's another reason for me just to do things. But living in that environment, we had a pool, we had tennis courts, pickleball courts, a small mountain behind us that's beautiful that has trails on it. And so I just took all that time, and plus I had to work at home. I couldn't come to the office. And at the time we weren't able to shut down our other pool. So I was in the pool every day, 7 days a week, and banging out yards. I got up to as high as 6,000 in one swim, and it was mostly just straight swimming. I wasn't doing sets or anything. I just hammer it out, and I've backed it down to where I do between 2,000 and 3,000, 3 to 5 days a week now, and I took up golf, and walk the golf courses, and I just go out walking in the community. I get in certainly over 10, between 15 and 20,000 steps a day. And that has led to where from the peak weight I was in 2019, by the end of this month, I will probably have hit the 100-pound mark in terms of
Oh
weight.
my gosh.
And,
Wow.
and I made a big change in how I eat too. So I read a book called Lifespan that I recommend to everybody by a guy named David Sinclair. It was life-changing for me. And I just am continuing to work on that. It's been a huge change in my life and all for the better.
Well, that's inspiring to hear, especially from someone who's gone I've gone in the opposite direction since we saw each other in March, but I have gotten back in and swimming. I've been swimming for the first time in 2 years. And I think that it was really good for me to stay away because, I think emotionally my heart wasn't in swimming. I was 2 years before that, I would go to the pool, but I'd sort of dread getting in. I'd dread doing stuff. And now I find myself like I'm really excited to get in and swim. And it's just a reminder to me that that's important too. That if you're going to do something, you have to you have to do more. It takes some time to turn the ship around with your motivation to get things. It sounds like you had a really strong motivation. So you got the ship turned around on a very tight schedule all of a sudden. But
well, and I rediscovered my love for being in the water. There's something that whenever I got back to it, when you jump in the water, there's just this electric feeling, and I can't describe it otherwise. There's a pulse of electricity, and we talk with Milt Nelms, and I talk with Milt about this, and I just I've always loved being in the water, and
yeah,
this has been the longest span that I hadn't swum, and why I put on all this weight. And it was, and it's the coaching lifestyle. Plus, I didn't coach at a pool that I owned or that the group, whoever I was working for, owned. So I could only be there for the rental hours.
right.
There was always things programmed. So even though I was a swim coach, I never had access to a pool. And finally, in this community, I can walk in. It's open till 9:30 at night. So even if I have a late day, I can get home and still get into the pool for 30 minutes. Get done what I need to get done. And I just love being back in the water, and it helps me think about technique more too. I'm more useful to my swimmers when I swim.
All right. I want to finish. One thing I've been doing with everybody is I finish with some lightning round questions. So
All right.
I'm just going to ask you some I want nothing too embarrassing. I'll just ask you some stuff and you just, blurt out whatever comes to mind first for you. First one, What is, when this pandemic is quote unquote over, what is the first thing from your previous life that you plan on doing?
Traveling to the Cook Islands to a little resort my wife and I like there. It's shut down now, and we'll go there for 2 weeks as soon as we can.
And you've been there before?
Yeah, we've been there several times now. We love it there.
Yeah, and I know you. I mean, also from knowing you on social media, you like to travel quite a
Yeah,
bit. I mean, you like to, like when you have international athletes, you like to get on a plane and go see them compete abroad. So, as someone also who loves to travel, that's also my answer. The first off, like as soon as I can safely get on a plane and go somewhere else and step off and be somewhere other than northern New Jersey, I'm going to do that.
yeah.
If you had to pick one swimmer from any era in their prime, this is a version of a question I asked Garrett McCaffrey, but I'm going to ask for a different event. You know, aliens come down and they go, we'll destroy your civilization unless you can beat us in a 50 freestyle. And we have a time machine. We can choose any athlete from any part of history to race the aliens in a 50 free. Who would you take?
Oh, geez. When you limit to the 50 free, I knew who my answer was going to be. My answer on any other swimmer question would be Shane Gould. I would always pick Shane Gould because she was 50 freestyler. That's a tough one. There's a lot of good ones in any era. I'd probably go with the UCLA guy, Tom Jager.
Okay. Follow-up question. Why, for any other race, why Shane Gould?
Because she's the best. I believe she was the best natural swimmer ever in the history of our sport. I think she has a gift for the water that nobody else has. There's been people that have come close. The fact that she held the world record in every freestyle event up to the 1500 plus the 200 IM all at the same time, that's remarkable to me. And she's just a gifted, talented athlete.
Yeah, and she did that in the modern era. I mean, like as a half Danish person, we did have a swimmer in Denmark who had the record, like 100 up to 1500 world record, but it was in the 1930s. And it's kind of hard to compare that era to the one, you know, Shane, we're talking, I guess, 45 years ago or so, when she was sort of at her athletic peak, and still a great athlete today.
Yeah. Australian Survivor winner. So.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. She beat a lot of people who are quite a bit younger than her on Australian Survivor. If you could pick the brain of one swim coach who's no longer with us for an hour today, who would that be?
I would have liked to have met Forbes Carlisle and pick his brain. And that's clearly a connection back to Shane and Milt. But everything I hear about him, he was quite an innovator and just a heck of a coach. So he'd probably be the guy.
All right. Well, that's all we got for today, Steve. Thank you so much for coming and answering all my questions, and for sharing some of your personal story with us and what you're doing at GCU. I think there's a lot there for people who, in whatever situation they're in, to model off of and learn from. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time. It's always good talking with you. Thank you.
Yep.